Hi everyone, and welcome to our second session of Ask the Expert. If you didn't know already, we're doing a series of live streams that are focusing on different individuals in different industries to give their perspective on their job roles and to give you advice about how you can potentially go into these different jobs. I'm really excited to welcome today's guest, partly because I know throughout these last few lockdowns, I've become obsessed with crime scene shows and think I'm probably the next best detective that anyone's ever going to meet. But with that, obviously, we need to know, are they realistic? So I'm really excited to welcome Chris today, who's a crime scene manager from Leicestershire Police. Hi, Chris.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you very much. So without further ado, I'm just going to go straight into the questions because you have such an interesting job role to talk about today. So can you just describe to me, what does a crime scene manager do?
Well, crime scene managers, basically, there's two halves to our role. So we'll have a day-to-day running of the office type role, and we'll also have an operational side of our role. So in the mornings, I'll go into the office, we'll have a briefing, and I'll brief the teams that are on that morning about what jobs have come in overnight, and we'll discuss cases that need to be discussed from the previous day, and anything else that can be added to the day's activities. The other side of my role, so that's the supervisory side of my role. The other side of my role is actually the crime scene manager type of a role. So a crime scene manager is exactly what it says on the tin. If a major incident happens or a serious incident happens that requires the input of multiple crime scene investigators, the crime scene manager's role will be to control the activities of the crime scene investigators. We will go into those scenes with a plan, and that plan is the responsibility of the crime scene managers to formulate that plan with the investigating officers and detectives about what's the best way to approach the scene and to deal with it correctly.
It's really interesting. I know we briefly just touched on this beforehand, but you mentioned about crime scenes being multiple crime scenes, and I think that's something that not everyone knows about exactly. So can you just briefly talk about how big the team is or what it means to have different multiple crime scenes?
Well, if you can imagine, we have volume crime and we have serious crime. So we have things like burglaries where crime scene investigators will go to those individually. That's one crime scene. When you start getting more serious incidents, so say someone's assaulted in the street, you'll have the scene where the assault takes place. Both the victim and the suspect will both become scenes because they've come into contact with each other, and there can be materials there that pass from one to the other. If that offender then gets into a car and drives home, the car then becomes a scene as well. And then if that person then gets out of the car, goes into his home and starts washing the blood off his clothing, then that house then becomes a crime scene as well. So you have crime scene managers would manage, say, the crime scene where the offence took place, but the multiple crime scene managers will be employed, if necessary, to control the other scenes. And all of those then feed into a crime scene coordinator, who's the role above mine. And they will do the liaison with the senior investigating officers and the investigation teams that have been assigned to that incident.
I think it's the public perception as well that a lot of TV shows, and we'll come to this question later, that they only ever really deal with the body in a show, whereas actually it spreads across a load of different evidence at different points within the crime that's been committed as well. So thanks for answering that, Chris. Moving on to the next one, can you explain your job progression which led you to become a crime scene manager? Now, I know the policing and entries have changed probably since you entered this role, but what was your progression?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't particularly get on well at school. I did leave with a few GCSEs, but I was quite taken with going into the army from quite an early age. So I went to an army apprenticeship college in Harrogate in North Yorkshire, where I actually did further education there, doing a city and guilds in sort of telecommunications, which then brushed up my maths and English, which I didn't do particularly well in before at school. It was a far better learning environment for me, and I much preferred it there. So it was a really good place to grow, learn, become confident in myself. So yeah, and if you think about transferable skills, it was a uniform job, working in environments of high pressure, stressful environments. So gaining skills there. I came out of the army and went sort of into a less sort of field, really. I moved to Leicester. I come from Melton, came out of the army, moved to Leicester, and started doing those sort of temping jobs while I found my feet and what have you. And I found myself working at Jessop's and getting really interested in photography. So whilst I was at Jessop's, I borrowed cameras and what have you, and learn the photography, which was actively encouraged. So you got a really good sound knowledge of photography and how to do the imaging side of things. When I was at Jessup, digital photography was just coming about, and we'd get these cameras with tiny little pixelated pictures on the back and being told that these would be the future, and no one believed it. And look at it now. So I learned my trade as a photographer in Jessup, and then I went on to become a professional photographer, a professional sports photographer. Again, wow. further developing those photography skills there in environments where everything happens very quickly. You have to be really on the ball. Unfortunately, the pay and conditions weren't exactly brilliant, and I was only young at the time, so that didn't last too long. But it still gave me time to, like I say, learn those photography skills. I then went into nursing, strangely enough, trying to find that career that would give me the similar sort of feedback that being in the army would. And in nursing, I managed to work in accident and emergency. I worked in acute mental health, which gave you that sort of dealing with people skills, interacting with people that aren't probably in their best health or in their best frame of mind, and using personal communication skills to be able to talk to them, to be able to interact with them, de-escalate situations, or provide support to other people who are in situations that need extra input and things like that. So again, another dynamic working environment. Unfortunately, again, my wife was made redundant. We just bought a house. And so with being very, very poorly paid as a student nurse, I left to get a paid job. So not ideal from my point of view at the time. I was dead set of becoming an accident and emergency nurse at the time. And then I got a job working for the council. So I spent 5 years working for the council, doing business and service development there. And again, not really finding that same get up and go that the army gave me. I was still looking for that job where I could sort of build a career. And I saw the job in the Leicester Mercury and applied it, didn't think anything of it at all. And with crime scene investigation and the way that was you were recruited at the time, it was a lengthy process. It still is fairly lengthy at the moment, but I applied for the job and I got invited to the first interview, which was basically a set of tests, written tests, observational tests. And it took me a little bit by surprise because, an interview is sit down in your suit in front of 2 or 3 people and answer questions. Here I am trying to, being asked to put together a thermos flask that's disassembled in front of me. Look at a picture at the beginning of the interview and then draw that picture at the end of the interview. And all these strange little things, I wasn't quite prepared for it. And it was only once you pass those sorts of logic tests and intuitive, common sense tests, really, that then you get brought back for further testing and your actual interview. And I can remember to the day, I got back to work after my interview. Went okay. I didn't think it was, I didn't think I was the right skill set. I thought they wanted people that had already crime scene investigators before or had a background in forensics, that sort of thing. I can remember walking back into work after the interview, walking upstairs to Town Hall in Leicester and getting a phone call, and then just sitting down at my desk absolutely flabbergasted because no sooner as I basically about half an hour after the interview, I was handed the job.
Wow.
So that's where it all started, 2005, over 15 years ago.
That's amazing, that is. It just goes to prove that you must have had such a wealth of knowledge amongst all your previous jobs to that would, are transferable to your current job. So that's amazing that you've took all those experiences and you got the job. And I think it speaks volumes that within an hour you were offered the job itself. Where are we at in today's society if someone was applying for an entry-level position into crime scene or crime scene officer management, anything in that part of the police industry?
It's very different now. Thanks to the likes of CSI Miami, NSYS, and all these different programs that are flying around. They didn't exist when I was becoming a crime scene investigator, like say back in 2005. I think they were just being produced then, about 15 years ago. So, but now, I mean, we've had a round of recruitment recently, and the response was massive. It's such a popular area to get into. You get all sorts of people applying for the jobs, which creates a problem. Whilst I think now there would be an appetite to take skills that have been acquired in previous jobs that aren't quite applicable now, you've got to get through that interview. You've got to get through that shortlisting stage on your CV. So that's the key, is busting that shortlisting stage. So obviously maths and English. Not only does it teach you structure, it teaches you logic, it teaches you problem solving. If you think of algebra, what do you need to know algebra? People will say, never going to use algebra again. If you look at the theoretical side, you're given a problem with missing elements in it, which isn't too different to forensic investigation. Maths and English, I mean, you look at English, not only does it teach you how to write reports, how to write essays and things like that, it also gives you those communication skills, that language skills. And although, you speak English, communication skills that you learn in English can then be applied when you're talking, when you're in those situations where you may be not with an English speaking person. So you can then use your personal skills that you've learned whilst doing things like English to apply to those situations where you can improve your communications. So you've got the two sort of building blocks of any education, mathematics and English. But then you come to the more focused sort of subjects. So you're obviously looking at your sciences. So if you look at the forensic realm, as it were, you've got forensic investigation and you've also got forensic sciences. So you could become a crime scene investigator, or you could become a forensic scientist. So the scientist maybe will want to do the Dexter thing, blood pattern analysis, squirting blood all up a wall, yeah? So you're looking to do biology, okay? You're looking at blood, you're looking at fluids, you're looking at how a human body reacts to force or to a certain introduction of a foreign object, let's say, yeah? So you're looking at the biology sort of side of things. You could become a physical scientist. So you'll be looking at things like glass fragmentation. When you stand next to a window and you smash it, the glass mostly goes inside. But because of the way that glass breaks, and it has this desire to be very, very straight all the time, they sort of spin. The pieces of glass, when you shatter them in the middle, they spin. And as they spin, they create what's called backwards fragmentation. So the glass fragments may go in your hair, they may go on your clothing, they may be in the soles of your feet. We go along to a crime scene, find a broken window, collect some glass. You then get a suspect that's arrested. They have their clothes taken off them, they can have hair combings, and any fragments that are found can be analysed with the control sample that was subsequently found at the crime scene. They would then be packaged up and they would all go off to a forensic scientist to analyse. So now we're looking at chemistry. Yeah, we're looking at refractive indexes of glasses in oil, or we may be looking at using mass spectrometry to find out the chemical composition of different fragments or pieces of evidence at the scene. So already we're covering directly, really, chemistry and biology. So science is vitally important. Once you then progress in your sort of quest to become a crime scene investigator or a forensic scientist, you then, obviously the courses then get more specified. Chemistry with a forensic element, biology with a forensic element, going to do a forensic investigation course or a forensic science course at the universities, which are massively popular at the moment. There weren't any when I was when I first started. I think Durham were leading with one, or Strathclyde, I think, had a forensic course. But now virtually every university and most, a lot of colleges have sort of forensic elements to their courses or modules that you can sit with sort of pure chemistry or pure biology, or even physics. If you want to go and become a firearms scientist, how does a shot get from A to B and what happens to it during its course of its path? A lot of physics, a lot of energy, a lot of forces are involved. So we're now looking at physics as well. So you can see how various disciplines allow you those keys in the door to then sort of focus down to sort of get towards that forensic end game that you're looking for in your education. With myself, once I had become a forensic investigator, I had the opportunity then to do a diploma. So I've done a diploma in forensic crime scene investigation, but I did that after I got into the job. So there are diplomas available and all the further education courses, but solidly maths and English, and then your sciences. And a lot of colleges these days do uniformed services or courses of that nature. So they're always worth looking at again, and they always give you that scope. If you're the sort of person that's looking at the police, are you the same sort of person that may be looking at the army or the navy or the air force? You know, those sorts of people that like that challenge, that like that sort of uniform service. They're all really good sort of general courses that you can do, where if you want to go into then crime scene investigation or policing for that matter, the colleges are far more geared up now to do it than they were 15, 20 years ago.
Really interesting, especially to hear that there's so many different aspects of your job, and whereas one's quite science based and one's quite collective based where you're on site, and how they all work and intertwine with one another, that the different skills are required in different jobs. I think one of the questions that we're going to ask next is your job just like it's portrayed in crime TV shows such as Bones and CSI? For those who might not be aware, NCIS and all those that you watch are probably a bit more modern. Like you said, criminology was a massive course when I was looking at university over 10 years ago, because everyone thought that was a route to go into criminology. So is it just like it is on crime shows, or is there much more to your job than what they show?
What you tend to find is there is a very, very large brush to paint everything with that artistic license. I must have watched about 3 episodes of CSI with the ginger guy, I forget his name. And
Ratio Kane.
Horatio Kane, that's the guy.
Ratio Kane.
Yeah. And I think one of the ones I saw, there was a thin cable running from ceiling to floor, and someone put a machine gun at the top and let it go. And as the machine gun fired, it then sort of rattled around this pole, spraying everyone in this room with bullets. That doesn't happen. The computer programs that then plot out where the guy was standing or how they were standing, that tends to not happen. But what you do find with programs like Bones and CSI, they are firmly grounded in reality, but then it's just expanded upon. And the other thing that you tend to find is they combine roles together. So I've never seen a coroner at a crime scene, even a category A murder. I've never seen a coroner. So the coroner doesn't get involved in the criminal investigation side of things. Neither do lawyers at the crime scene. Home office pathologists. I think Silent Witness portrays a home office pathologist. Now, the home office pathologist will go to a crime scene. I've had many a conversation with them about how to deal with the death of the victim. Is it suspicious? Is it not? And so they do come out to the crime scene. So you get these mixture of roles. So in Silent Witness, I think they've sort of tried to combine a detective with a home office pathologist, you know, or it could be you combine a police officer with a crime scene investigator, give them a gun and a power of arrest. You know, you get this sort of thing. So there is a lot of artistic license, but things like fingerprinting, DNA, and footwear, they are real. You know, people do get convicted on the strength of fingerprints in the wrong place at the wrong time, so to speak.
It's really interesting, because when you said that, I'm literally reliving my Saturday nights, 9 o'clock, watching CSI, the Who music comes on, and there is a police officer who collects from the scene, but also goes to the lab and does the lab work, and that's just not what you do. But the basis of what you just said, the footprints, the DNA, the hair follicles, things like that, they are still quite important to the role in convicting someone. So obviously you've talked about you doing a diploma as part of your course after you got hired, but did you have a degree beforehand, and do students now need to go to university to come and work in the crime scene division?
I think now, like I say, we come back to that sort of getting through the sifting stage. If you have 5 people in front of you, 3 of which have got a university degree and 1 isn't, that 5th person might be the best person for the job. But on a CV, you've got to get through that, which is the problem that you're going to find these days with it being so popular, that if you haven't got those actual qualifications specified in the job description, you have then got to have something else to bring to the table. Otherwise, you're simply not going to get through that sifting phase. So say you are at university, and this is sort of a live sort of example. This is what happens. And we've got guys in the office where this sort of route is taking place. They've gone through their university, they've gone through their further education, and now they're on to the higher education. They've done forensic sciences. But they have their year out, they have their summer work. And in that, we've had guys that come to us from Nottingham Trent University, say, they come down to us and they do office tasks and get immersed into the office environment, you know, picking up the jobs that need doing, but we simply haven't got time, or just providing administrative support to that role. Submitting things, you know, people come back to the office with lots of exhibits. They need to get from A to B, and they will facilitate that sort of thing. So they will aid that sort of thing. So when they then go for their job interview, not only does it say a degree in forensic investigation or a degree in forensic biology, it also says work for 6 months with Leicestershire Police, or I had a year out working with Leicestershire Police in the crime scene investigation department doing X, Y, and Z. So there are other ways and means. There are other private companies, what we call independent service providers, who deal with lab-based stuff. And they're always worth getting involved with, even if it is just to chat and figure out best courses of action for what you want to do in that specific field, whether it be forensic anthropology or, like I say, biology. Speaking to the guys themselves and creating that that professional relationship prior to actually getting the job counts for a lot, because it shows you that you've got the longevity that's required to build up that skill set and build up that knowledge base to be able to do that crime scene investigation effectively with a good solid background.
That's great, because it's good to hear that, you know, obviously they're not going to be allowed, if you want work experience, you're not going to be allowed on the crime stream straight away. There's certain protocols and stuff, but you can do things to enhance your CV to get the job and make just your CV more desirable to the police force as well. So obviously, I think one of the hitting questions that people don't realise and you can answer is, what sort of hours do you work as part of your job position?
Well, we cover 365 days a year. However, we don't do an overnight shift. Some forces do, we tend not to. So we work from 7 in the morning, where someone will arrive in the office and look at the jobs that have come in on our systems overnight, prioritize the jobs, see which ones need to attend, see which ones are maybe a business doesn't open until the afternoon, and things like that. They'll sort all that out. So that's what happens 7 o'clock in the morning. 8 o'clock, we'll have a briefing with the team that's on duty that day, and we'll go through what we need to do, who's going where, basically, and is there anything important that needs to be shared amongst the team. And then they'll go out and do their job. So they'll work through, they'll go out and they'll be out at scenes for 3 or 4 hours, maybe longer, and then they'll come back and they'll do their paperwork and finish sort of 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. Meanwhile, we'll have a second shift that will start about midday and do exactly the same thing, just 6 hours later, 5 hours later. And then they will work through till 10 o'clock at night. After 10 o'clock, I'll take a phone home, a crime scene investigator will take a phone home, and then if anything serious happens overnight, they'll give me a ring and basically say, we found the body, or other dramatic things. And then I will then take that decision. Do I need to escalate this to my crime scene coordinator? Can I just send a crime scene investigator, or do we both need to go out? So if it's raining and say we've got a body that's outside, we need to put tents up. It's a far bigger job. Whereas sometimes it's just a question of, we just want some photographs for the coroner, so we can then say we can send a CSI out and take photographs and do an analysis of the scene, just to ensure there's nothing overt that's going to raise suspicion. So we cover 7 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, But we do have long days, we do have long nights, and like I say, we have to work Christmas, Easter, public holidays, and all that sort of thing as well. So it always makes it fun when we're trying to book annual leave.
Yes, I've had that conversation before with your wife. So yeah, with that, it's one of them jobs where you have to have the level of flexibility. If you called into work on your birthday, sorry, Christmas Day and everything, it's one of the jobs being part of, I suppose, uniform public services, that you give up those liberties when you sign up to the job. It's what is expected of you. There might be some fair share of obviously annual leave, hopefully, with that job though. Am I right?
Oh yeah, I'll always make sure I have some downtime, that's for sure.
That's great. So, obviously, your job isn't always glorified and everything like that. It can be really harrowing at times. So, is there anything that people don't know about your job that might surprise them?
Well, I had a bit of think about this. With not knowing, it's hard. It's hard from being on the inside to look at that. What's surprising about the job? There are surprising elements about what we do. DNA, take DNA. Up until 1984, DNA it wasn't around. I was trained by somebody who was in the job pre 1984, and they would need buckets of blood to get your blood type. You know, I think it was something like a 50p piece or even larger before they can tell you, oh, that's an A positive body, or the blood at that assault scene is O neg, that type of thing. Alec Jeffreys, who is at Leicester University and developed DNA profiling here in Leicester, which I always found amazing. You know, we're sat right in the middle of the epicenter of modern forensics. In terms of DNA analysis, it was done here by a Leicester guy. And it took about 3 years before that discovery of DNA profiling came to the fore. And I know guys that were working on the case at the time. In 1987, there's the notorious case of Colin Pitchfork, the first person to be convicted of a DNA on DNA evidence. And that happened from where I'm sitting here, about 4 miles over there. So not only was DNA invented in Leicester, but it was also first used in a high-profile case in Leicester. And I always found that amazing. And I'm constantly being surprised. And only the other day I was watching a Dara O'Brien thing where he made DNA, or he visualized DNA by using spit, pineapple juice of all things, there's an enzyme in it apparently, washing up liquid with strong alcohol. And I think it's on YouTube. You can put it in, you know, how to make your own DNA sort of thing. And just by breaking down the cell walls, using washing up liquid, and then using the enzyme in the pineapple juice to break it down further and to extract that DNA, and then using the alcohol to separate the two, you can physically create your own DNA in a glass and pick it up. You know, and I always find that amazing. So like I say, Leicester really is the epicenter of modern forensics. Oh, that's what I'm claiming.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. I think it's amazing how many times I watch different crime scene documentaries online. They reference, obviously, DNA came out at this point. It annoys me when they don't mention it came from Leicester or the UK in general, especially when they're American crime shows as well. That annoys me. There's a science experiment for you all. If you YouTube that, create your own DNA at home. That'll keep you busy until the next lockdown is lifted. So following that, we do have a question from our audience, Chris, and it is Callum. He's wondering, how much do crime scene managers earn?
Well, there's a question. I probably earn. I've been in 15 years, and I probably earn about 45,000 a year. But there is overtime in there. There's long days in there, and there's a lot of hard work in there. So the money, when you start, the money is okay, you know. But then the responsibility you have is large. You know, you could go to a crime scene, a car. When you first start, you'll be a volume crime scene examiner. You can go to a car, lift a fingerprint. That fingerprint could put somebody away for a very long time. So the responsibility of getting that right and not making mistakes is quite large. And it's something that almost goes over your head when you're doing it, because there's a bit of a disconnect between the action of lifting a fingerprint and seeing someone being jailed in the Leicester Mercury. But it is a responsible job. You don't get that money for free. And yeah, there are some choice days where you'd rather not be. You know, it's we deal with some quite horrible things, quite upsetting things. So yeah, we do earn that 45. Yeah.
Definitely. You got to start somewhere as well. So entry level, and Chris,
Absolutely.
you're still a young man considering how many jobs you've had. You can be where Chris is right now at his age. So thank you for answering that on the earning ones. Not everyone is upfront about that, but that really does help our students understand progression, how that responsibility equals higher pay a lot of the time. So my final question today for you, Chris, is what is the most rewarding aspect of your job?
Well, if you like to see the end result, it is there. You know, some people really like, you know, craftspeople, artists like to start with nothing and end up with a final product. And that journey from A to B is where the satisfaction lies. And that is there in forensics. Even if you do the smallest part of a role at a large crime scene, you can still take pride in seeing guys at the end, some quite nasty criminals, going away for a long time. But I think to find on a personal level, the one thing that really got me is about 10 years ago, I attended it was a horrible case where a young male had been murdered in Leicester. And I was one of the principal CSIs at the scene, and it went on for several days. Subsequent to the actual incident and doing all the forensic work, I then spent several days at Crown Court and had the pleasure of seeing them go down for a long time. What really got me was about 18 months later, I was at a crime scene very nearby. So the same sort of estate where the murder had happened. And there was a cordon out, and I was just coming in and out of the house that I was at, back to my van, get supplies, that sort of thing. And whilst I was there, this guy walked up to the PCSO on the scene guard and said, I really didn't like policemen, but you solved my brother's murder. His memorial's just up the road there. And thanked him, you know, and you could see the sincerity in what he was saying. And although it wasn't directed at me, like I say, that I was heavily involved in that case. And just hearing that, it stayed with me, you know, it stayed with me for the last 10 years since I've heard it. So whenever everyone says it really chokes you sometimes, but it's at the strange times when you don't expect it, you know.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously it's a hard thing being a police officer. You do get a lot of rap for not doing everything perfectly or solving every crime and putting away the perpetrators. But like you said, it's those moments that reassure you that you're doing a good job and that you've been respected for that as well. Because like you said, Chris, it's not easy. You have to go into some horrible crime scenes. It isn't the pleasantest of jobs at times. So for you to be rewarded in that aspect, and that's great. So thank you for answering that question. That's really honest, and it's fantastic for you to join us today. Obviously, following what Chris has said about his job role and the skills and qualifications required to work in crime scene division in the police, we do actually have a new course within our T levels within science where you get to have an industry placement. Possibly not on the crime scene, but maybe in the admin side, like Chris has described today, and you can work in laboratory sciences, all along their lines. And like Chris also said, there's also other courses as well you could go into, like through the photography route. Science is important, but we do have the courses at Leicester College to help you get to this career. So do visit our website for more information about the courses we offer, but also book an appointment with our careers advisor, and they'll be able to walk you through all the different aspects that Chris has described today, but also help you get your CV together, which Chris has also said is very important. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for talking about your job role. It's a fantastic and inspiring one to do. So thank you very much.
No problem at all.